الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. From the book of الترغيب والترهيب by Imam al-Mundari rahimahullah, in Kitab al-Sawm, the chapter of fasting. We'll just take a few hadith inshallah for a few minutes. The first chapter in this book of al-Sawm, he says الترغيب في الصوم مطلقا وما جاء في فضله وفضل دعاء الصائم. الترغيب, the encouragement, the rewards in fasting مطلقا, meaning in the absolute sense, without any conditions, without any being tied to specific times or place. And also what came in the fadl, in the virtue of fasting and the virtue of the dua, the supplication of the fasting person. The first hadith, the famous hadith reported by Imam Bukhari and Muslim, the hadith of Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الله عز وجل كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصوم فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به والصيام جنة فإذا كان يوم صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يصخب فإن سابه أحد أو قتله فليقل إني صائم والذي نفس محمد بيده لخلوف فم الصائم أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك للصائم فرحتان يفرحهما إذا أفطر فرح بفطره وإذا لقي ربه فرح بصومه. And this hadith is hadith Qudsi. Briefly, inshallah, otherwise there's great benefits in the hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصوم. Every action of the son of Adam is for him except fasting. فإنه لي, it's for me. And this statement, وأنا أجزي به, and I give the reward for it. The ulama talked a lot about this statement, which the first and a very obvious meaning of it, it shows the importance of fasting. Singling out fasting from the rest of the good deeds, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say it in such a way that الصوم لي وأنا أجزي به. Fasting is for me and I give the rewards for it. All of the actions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the rewards for it. But this is something special for fasting. Some said, for example, that since ibadatul sawm, there's no riyah in it. There's no showing off in fasting. You can't show off that you're fasting because you're abstaining from what breaks the fast. If it's an action like salah, a person can show off his salah, but you cannot show off something that you're abstaining from. So that's why it's because of the ikhlas, because of the sincerity. It's a secret. الصيام سر بين العبد وربه. It's a secret between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one knows that you're fasting except Allah. Person can break his fast with his intentions. So it's a secret between the person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the rewards, as also some said, the angels, they do not record this. It is not to the angels where they record the normal deeds. It's something that is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Secret. It's the secret of also the rewards. And if it's the case, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about himself, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَالسَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So there's no like of fasting. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Abu Darda radiallahu anhu, عَلَيْكَ بِالصِّيَامِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا عِدْلَ لَهُ. Keep on fasting because there's no equal to fasting. There's no ibadah like fasting when it comes to the rewards. This is mutlaqan, this is in general. But then when you awaken the obligatory fast, this is even beyond one's imagination. Al-fard, the obligation. If you compare it to the nafl, there's no comparison to start with. So if someone, for example, fasted, and this is without exaggeration, if he fasted every day in his life, which is not permissible, the reward of that compared to 1 day of Ramadan fasting, the 1 day of Ramadan fasting is much more in rewards. Because this is fard, this is an obligation. And the hadith, this is again not something that we bring from ourselves. This is what the Prophet ﷺ, he said also hadith Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. That my slave would never get himself closer to me, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by something more beloved to Allah than what Allah had made it obligatory upon them. So the obligations, this is the most important action, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it an obligation. It's the most rewardable acts whatsoever. And from this a person would get then the fiqh, the understanding of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salatul Dhuhr in the masjid is much more in rewards than Salatul Taraweeh and the night prayer altogether. It doesn't mean that we belittle the night prayer, but it shows the importance of the fard. So one of which is fasting, the fard of fasting. This is the reward that no one can ever imagine when it's fasting in general. How about then the fard? And more even meanings that they mentioned with regards to this. And it shows the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to this act of worship. And since also it's the ibadah that a person endures patience in for the sake of Allah. And since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about as-sabr, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the reward of as-sabirin بغير حساب, without a limit, without count. So كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصوم فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. والصيام جنة. Junnah with a dhamma on the jeen, that means a shield. Junnah is a shield. So fasting is shield, that means it shields the person from all kinds of evil things. Sins, if it's done in the right way, from punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protects the person from falling into disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protects the honor and dignity of the person. وَالصِّيَامُ جُنَّةٌ. And therefore, then explains it afterwards, فَإِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ صَوْمِ أَحَدِكُمْ. If it's the day of your fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَصْخَبْ. He should not say foul language, bad words, things that is explicit. He should respect what he says, because he's in state of ibadat. When someone is in salah, for example, it's not permissible to speak. When someone is reciting Quran, it's not permissible to stop the recitation to curse someone, for example. It's inappropriate. When a person is fasting, he's doing an act of ibadah. So then to respect this ibadah is not to say bad things, not to backbite, not to say bad language and so on. وَلَا يَصْخَبْ. As-sakhab is raising the voice, screaming, yelling, things of that nature. فَإِنْ سَابَّهُ أَحَدٌ أَوْ قَتَلَهُ. To the extent of which if someone sabbahu, someone revils when someone dispute with him, fight with him with words, exchange words, أَوْ قَتَلَهُ, he wants to fight with him, فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّي صَائِمْ إِنِّي صَائِمْ. He should say, I'm fasting, I'm fasting. And this is not riyah, this is not showing off. This is applying what the hadith says. If someone is in a heated argument, he wants to extract from you the same, then to say, إِنِّي صَائِمْ إِنِّي صَائِمْ. And you say it also with, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَصْخَبْ. Not إِنِّي صَائِمْ, إِنِّي no, but rather to be calm, إِنِّي صَائِمْ. I'm in a state that is different than yours. The fasting person is supposed to be in a different state. His state is completely different because of this act of worship, which is fasting. وَالَّذِي نَفْسُ مُحَمَّدٍ بِيَدِهِ. The Prophet ﷺ swears by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though he's a sadiq al-masduq, everything is the truth. But usually these hadith where the Prophet ﷺ swears, because then wait for what comes after. What comes after, it's something that people, according to the physical means, they would, if there's no wahy, they would say, no, this is not right. But the wahy revelation comes to change what people physically would see as correct, to correct their understanding even. So here, la khuluf fam as-sa'im. Al-khuluf is the smell that comes in the mouth of the fasting person as a result of not eating. And it's called khuluf because as ma yukhallifu al-ta'am, what the food is left in the mouth of a person after he eats, it's because of the empty stomach. Not because that he didn't wash his mouth or didn't use toothpaste or siwak. You can do all of this as long as a person doesn't swallow anything. But it doesn't take away the smell. It won't take the smell because it's because of the empty stomach. So that smell of the mouth of the fasting person, أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك. This is more pleasant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the smell of musk. So that also requires or it shows the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's more pleasing to Allah than the smell of musk, because this is the smell as a result of the ibadah, as a result of the obedience of Allah, which shows that if the ibadah leads to some level of maybe a person doesn't look, like for example in Hajj, someone is wearing the ihram, it doesn't look pleasant, shave his head and he's dusty. He's not doing that intentionally just to look like this, but the ibadah made him to be in such a state. This is the most beloved state in that context to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person is fasting and as a result of this, he has this is the most, it's more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the smell of musk. Then the last statement in the hadith, لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ يَفْرَحُهُمَا. The fasting person has two moments of joy that he enjoys. Al-farah is the enjoyment, is this feel of joy. إذا أفطر فرح بفطره. When he breaks his fast, he's enjoying that moment of breaking the fast, which is physically very obvious. When someone is fasting, even the children when they fast, this is a very happy moment. And it's very important for the human beings to have happiness. Right? Life is all kinds of different things in it. So to enjoy something, it's a good thing. So enjoying the moment of fitr. But what's more important is the joy that a person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him and guided him to complete a day of fasting. That's the real joy. So the joy comes that a person is breaking his fast because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him to break the fast. That's why it's from the sunnah, once the sun sets, not to delay, not to wait for minutes, or to think that this is better for one's religion. No, لا يزال الناس بخير. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, people are still continue to be in goodness مَا عَجَّلُوا الْفِطْرِ, as long as they in haste and breaking their fast. That means once the sun sets, they should not wait. Otherwise, this is a bad sign for them. So it shows that they abstained from food and drink and not breaks the fast. Obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they break their fast, also for the obedience of Allah. So this is the moment of joy. And وَإِذَا لَقِيَ رَبَّهُ فَرِحَ بِصَوْمِهِ. And when he meets his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will have the joy because of his fasting. But the joy then, where as mentioned in the first sentence of the hadith, الصَّوْمُ لِي, he would then become revealed to him what has been kept for him of the rewards that no one can ever imagine, no heart can ever imagine the extent of this reward. This is when a person returns to Allah. That's why liqa'ullah, meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers, is the best thing ever. And what prevents the person of having that joy in this life is the sins, the shortcomings and so on. So when a person is helped with the good deeds, thinking of this, and that's why one of the great benefits of the hadith, that the unseen, a person would have his heart to work based on this. So the shawq ila liqa'illah, one of the dua of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, وَأَسْأَلُكَ الشَّوْقَ إِلَى لِقَائِكَ في غير ضراء مضرة ولا فتنة مضلة. That means, oh Allah, I ask you to have a shawq, to have the love, the yearning to meet you. That a person would love to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without harm afflicting me and without a fitna, a trial that would harm me. And that's why it happens at the moment of death. When Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, كُلُّنَا كَرَهُ الْمَوْتِ, all of us hate death, O Prophet of Allah. And death is the only way that a person would then get to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has to be through death. And everybody hates death. So the Prophet ﷺ explained to her when he said before that إِذَا أَحَبَّ الْعَبْدُ لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَهُ. If the abd, the slave of Allah, loves to meet Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to meet him. And whoever مَنْ كَرِهَ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَهُ. And whoever hates to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will hate to meet him. So she said, we all hate death. He said, this is not what is meant meaning in this life. He says, when the moment of death comes onto the person. For the believers, they will get the good news of that they are from among the people of Jannah. Allah is pleased with them. Then the believer would want to go forward, of course. He would then love to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would love to meet him. And for the disbeliever at the moment of death, when he's given the news of the punishment of Allah, he would hate, of course, to go forward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hate to meet him. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for each and every one of us to witness the month of Ramadan in the proper way and to fulfill the rights of this month according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and to observe this great favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that there is no like of it whatsoever. And we'll continue subhanahu wa ta'ala with more of the hadith of the chapter. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.